Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Today, we're looking into something that, well, it really shouldn't exist. Not because it breaks the laws of physics. Not exactly.
It's more that its arrival, and maybe more importantly, the silence that followed, it just completely contradicts everything we think we know.
All the systems of tracking, of manufacturing, of accountability that we assume are watching over our world.
Right, we're talking about an object that turned up in one of the most remote places on Earth.
And after it arrived, it didn't behave the way its own physical reality says it absolutely should have.
Our story starts deep in the Australian interior, and you have to picture this place. It's defined by its scale, really.
Just vast, empty space.
Vast, silent. A landscape where something unusual can happen and it doesn't immediately get noticed. Not like it would in a city.
And that setting is so important because the story of this Tungsten Sphere, it didn't begin with an official report.
No air traffic control logs, no satellite anomalies flagged. It started with people talking, locals, whispers about a sound.
A loud sound and a flash. And then later, the discovery of this perfectly spherical object.
And that's where the real mystery begins, because there was one detail that immediately took this out of the realm of just, a curious find.
The core contradiction.
The core contradiction. For its size, the object had this unsettling, almost impossible weight.
You look at it and your eyes tell you one thing.
And then you try to pick it up and your body tells you something completely different. This physical mismatch, this gap between what you see and what you feel, that's where the journey into the unknown really starts.
Your brain just tells you this is wrong.
Exactly. It's a feeling of profound incorrectness.
So that initial feeling, that cognitive friction, that's the key. Let's start unpacking what we actually know about this thing. I think we have to begin with the description of the find itself, and specifically the physical perfection of it.
It was a sphere, and by all accounts, a true, seamless, unnervingly precise sphere.
Not something that just looked round-ish?
No, not at all. The accounts are consistent on this. It looked machined. It looked designed, finished, not some natural rock or a piece of melted, chaotic debris.
That precision. It's the first major roadblock for any simple explanation.
It really is. Witnesses, they all describe it the same way. Smooth, flawless, perfectly symmetrical.
What about the color, the finish?
Generally a uniform metallic gray. Some people describe it as more of a deep gunmetal color. But what's really critical is what wasn't there.
What was absent?
Exactly. No weld marks, no seams from being cast in two halves, no small holes, no threads that would suggest it was supposed to be bolted onto something bigger.
So, to all intents and purposes, it appeared to be a single solid object.
A single solid finished piece of engineering.
Which brings us to what I think is the single most baffling physical part of this entire case. The unmarked landing. You have an object this dense, this heavy. It's falling from any kind of significant height, whether that's a kilometer or 100 kilometers up.
The laws of physics are pretty clear on what should happen next.
They are. The impact should have been, it should have been violent. It should have been devastating.
Absolutely. The ground out there in the interior, it's not soft soil. It's compacted, it's dry, it's incredibly hard.
So when something with that much mass hits that surface at high speed, you expect
a crater, a significant one. You expect fractured earth, maybe radial lines spreading out. You expect debris from the displaced soil thrown everywhere.
But that's not what they found.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The consistent story from the finders is that the sphere was just resting on the surface, or it was embedded only very, very slightly.
As if someone had just placed it there.
Which makes no sense.
Things dropped from a height accelerate.
Right.
Gravity doesn't make exceptions. An object this dense should maximize its terminal velocity and do incredible damage to the landscape it strikes.
The lack of a scorch mark, the lack of a debris field, and most of all, the lack of a substantial crater. That observation is so deeply counterintuitive.
It forces you immediately to start considering extraordinary possibilities.
It does. Either the object fell from a height of just a few feet, which doesn't fit with the reports of a loud sound from the sky.
Or something else happened. Some mechanism, known or unknown, slowed it down massively just before it hit the ground.
And that leads us to the most disorienting factor of all, the mass.
The weight.
The weight was what really caused the alarm. If you try to compare it to everyday objects, people said it was maybe the size of a large grapefruit or a small bowling ball.
Okay, so a 10-pin bowling ball, that weighs what, 12, maybe 16 pounds?
Around there, yes. But the effort it took to lift this sphere was described as just astonishing, bordering on impossible for something of that size.
That anecdotal data is so important. You hear these phrases like immediate strain.
Or the feeling of lifting a solid block of lead disguised as something smaller.
That's that cognitive friction you mentioned earlier, that gut feeling that the object isn't conforming to what your eyes are telling you. It must be overwhelming.
It has to be. Imagine you reach for an 8-inch ball and your muscles prepare to lift, say, 15 pounds.
Right. Your body anticipates the effort.
But then the object exerts 50, maybe 60 pounds of force against you. The sense of shock, of wrongness would be immediate and very, very unnerving.
To put some science to this, we have to talk about density.
Density is the key. It's mass divided by volume. So for context, water is 1 gram per cubic centimeter.
Okay.
Aluminum is about 2.7, steel is around 7.8. Lead, which we all think of as very heavy, is about 11.3 grams per cubic centimeter.
So where does this sphere fall?
To get the kind of weights people were describing for an object of that size, you're talking at a density in the range of 17 to 20 grams per cubic centimeter.
And what materials are in that range?
Well, you're looking at things like gold, platinum, or, critically for this story, tungsten.
And this huge physical anomaly, it forced anyone looking at this to just bypass the simple explanations.
Right. Initially, people thought, okay, maybe it's space debris.
Or a piece of military test equipment that went astray. An unusual meteorite, even.
But as soon as you apply the physical facts of the sphere itself to those ideas, they fall apart.
Let's take space debris. If it was a standard piece of a satellite or a rocket that survived coming back into the atmosphere,
it would have gone through extreme heating and friction, a process called ablation. The surface should be melted, burned, discolored, deformed.
But this sphere,
it retained the precision of its machining.
Yeah.
That seamless, perfect surface is a massive, massive contradiction to the physics of reentry.
And the meteorite theory is just as weak, isn't it?
Even more so, maybe. Meteorites are rocks from space. They might have a lot of iron in them, but they are always irregular. They're fractured or fused into these jagged, chaotic shapes.
They do not arrive as a flawlessly manufactured sphere.
Never. A perfect sphere simply contradicts everything we know about natural cosmic debris that makes it to the ground.
So we have this growing list of questions.
A multiplying set of questions, really. Why was it perfectly symmetrical and undamaged? That defies the physics of both entry and impact.
And if it was some kind of advanced hardware, why was there no recovery effort? No one came looking for it.
Exactly. The failure of all those conventional explanations, it forces you to focus on the material itself. A material so dense, so heavy, it seems to have somehow, circumvented or neutralized the very forces that should have shattered it on impact.
So given its size and those really startling weight reports, analysts had to do the math. They had to run the volume-to-weight calculations.
They did. And the material that consistently came up, the one that matched that extreme density profile of nearly 20 grams per cubic centimeter, was tungsten.
Tungsten, or a high-density tungsten alloy.
Yes. And it's important for people to understand the scale we're talking about here. Tungsten is nearly 2.5 times denser than steel.
It's one of the very densest elements that we commonly use in technology today.
It is. And that fact alone, just the material identification, it immediately elevates this sphere. This isn't just a piece of scrap metal. This is a component of significant engineering intent.
The choice of that material has profound implications. Tungsten is not a casual material choice.
Not at all. It's expensive.
Right.
And crucially, it is notoriously difficult to work with. You need specialized infrastructure, specialized expertise.
And that difficulty in manufacturing, that directly speaks to the perfection of this sphere that witnesses described.
It does. Tungsten has the highest melting point of any element. It doesn't become a liquid until you get it over 3,400 degrees Celsius.
To put that in perspective,
it's almost 3 times the melting point of iron. You can't just melt tungsten down and pour it into a mold like you would with bronze or aluminum. The technology is completely different.
So how do you do it? How do you create a seamless, featureless, solid sphere of tungsten?
You have to use a process called powder metallurgy, specifically something called sintering. You take very fine tungsten powder, you compress it under immense pressure, and then you heat it in a furnace to a temperature just below its melting point.
So it never actually becomes a full liquid?
Never. The particles just freeze together under that intense heat and pressure. It creates a solid, dense object. And then to get that flawless, seamless surface people described,
You'd have to machine it.
you'd have to painstakingly machine it or polish it, probably using diamond-tipped tools, because tungsten isn't just dense, it's also extremely hard.
That entire process-centering, high-precision machining that rules out almost all common industrial uses, doesn't it?
It does. We're not talking about a simple ball bearing. We're talking about a very advanced engineering component.
Let's consider where you usually find tungsten parts. If it were a ball from, say, a grinding mill,
It would have obvious signs of abrasion, surface wear, pitting. It would look used.
and if it were a counterweight from some heavy machinery,
It would almost certainly have mounting holes or threads or some kind of markings for identification and balance. This sphere was described as pristine and featureless.
so it was engineered for a very specific, very high-performance function.
A function where density was the primary requirement, maybe the only requirement.
What about the other physical tests that were done on it? We know that early on, they established it had little to no magnetic attraction.
Right, and that's completely consistent with pure tungsten or certain tungsten alloys. And it immediately rules out a lot of the common, cheaper iron or steel alloys you might find in scrap.
So again, that reinforces the idea that this was a deliberately engineered object using an advanced material.
It does. But then the reports about its temperature behavior, this is where things get even stranger. And it's where human perception, while subjective, it really adds to the sense of anomaly.
Because we have these confusing, almost contradictory anecdotes,
We do. Some people said the sphere held its heat for a very long time after being warmed.
which would be a sign of high thermal mass, something tungsten definitely has.
Right. If you heat something that dense, it holds that energy for a while. But then you have other reports claiming the exact opposite, that the sphere felt unusually cold to the touch.
Colder than the ambient temperature around it.
Much colder. As if it were actively drawing heat away from your hand when you touched it.
So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, objective data is what's missing. But the fact that the sphere consistently provoked an unusual sensory report is telling in itself.
The common thread isn't the temperature, it's the feeling of strangeness.
Exactly. The shared feeling was that the object was not inert. A simple rock feels like a rock. This felt present. It challenged your basic expectations of how heat transfer should feel.
Whether it was the tungsten's efficiency of pulling heat away quickly, or its high specific heat making it slow to warm up.
The end result was a palpable sense of anomaly when you handled it.
So we have an object made of an advanced, expensive, specialized material. It's produced with incredible precision, it lands without damage, and it prompts these strange sensory reports.
But the ultimate paradox, the one thing that prevents any kind of resolution, is the total absence of accountability.
It's unclaimed.
Completely unclaimed. If this were a component from an aerospace project or a piece of sensitive military hardware, its loss would have been a catastrophic event, operationally and financially.
You use tungsten in things like kinetic energy projectiles, things that rely on sheer mass and speed to defeat armor.
Or in high altitude and space-based ballast systems where you need the absolute maximum weight in the minimum possible volume.
And those components are tracked meticulously.
You the Graham, you would expect the world's most discreet cleanup crew to show up almost immediately. Maybe in civilian clothes, trying to be low-key.
To recover the item, analyze the site, make sure no sensitive data was left behind.
Absolutely. The materials are far too expensive and the potential operational exposure is far too high for them to just be abandoned in a civilian area.
And yet what we have is total silence.
Total silence. No government agency, no defense contractor, no corporation, domestic or international, has ever stepped forward to claim it or even admit they lost something.
This lack of a paper trail, no official recovery mandate. It is the very definition of a physical discrepancy.
It exists entirely outside of any known system. It's too precise to be a natural geological oddity.
Too dense to be common industrial junk.
And too ignored to be officially acknowledged. It's a piece of advanced technology with no user manual, no owner, and no serial number.
When an object refuses to fit into any of the known categories, that vacuum of information, it gets filled instantly with theories.
It does. So let's try to work through them systematically. Let's look at the main rational explanations and see where the physical evidence, the sphere itself, just breaks them down.
We should start with the perennial favorite, space debris.
The space debris theory. It holds that this sphere is a piece of ballast or a counterweight from an old satellite, maybe a rocket booster, and that it survived re-entry because tungsten is just so incredibly dense and has such a high melting point.
And on the surface, it's a compelling idea. Things do fall out of orbit all the time.
They do, but the evidence against it is just overwhelming.
Let's start with the heat. The heat of re-entry, orbital velocity, is staggering.
You're
talking tens of thousands of kilometers an hour.
When an object moving at that speed hits the atmosphere, the friction generates temperatures in the thousands of degrees. It's like hitting a wall of fire.
Even if the core of the object survives, the surface has to bear the brunt of that.
It has to. And it doesn't matter how high your melting point is. That intense heat and pressure, it causes ablation. The surface material literally burns and vaporizes away.
And that process is never uniform. It's chaotic.
It is. You end up with a pitted, scorched, asymmetrical exterior. The sphere's seamless, pristine surface, it directly refutes the idea of an uncontrolled, high-velocity atmospheric reentry. That perfect machine finish is completely inconsistent with the forces of orbital decay.
Okay, so that's the first major contradiction, but then there's the second one.
The impact force.
The impact. Even if we imagine it somehow survived the heat without a scratch, it would still hit the ground at its terminal velocity.
And for an object of this extreme density, its terminal velocity, the maximum speed it can reach while falling, would be significantly higher than a less dense object of the same size.
Right, because it's so dense it just punches through the air more efficiently. It doesn't slow down as much.
It retains its velocity. It would hit the ground with the force of a small car being dropped from several stories up.
The lack of a crater, this gentle landing that all the witnesses describe, it suggests one of two things.
Either it was slowed down by some kind of internal mechanism we don't understand,
or it never reached a high altitude to begin with, which contradicts the space debris idea entirely.
The debris theory fails on both the physical evidence of the surface and the physical evidence of the landing site. It just doesn't work.
So let's move to the second major theory. This one aligns better with the material choice: military and classified hardware.
Yes. Tungsten is, as you said, a metal used in conflict. It's perfect for kinetic energy applications.
The material fits, but the form factor, the shape, is where this argument starts to have problems.
It is. Advanced weapons components, especially those used in precision munitions or in high-velocity tests, they are never deployed without meticulous identification and tracking systems.
And why is that tracking so vital, even for just a solid sphere?
A few reasons. First, quality control. Manufacturing batch tracking. If a component fails or doesn't perform as expected, you have to be able to trace it back to the exact factory, the specific batch of material, the date it was made.
And a perfectly featureless sphere is useless for that.
Completely. You need serial numbers or micro-etched identifiers, or at least a port for a transponder. Second, for performance analysis, if you're testing a new payload, you need to measure its flight, its stability, its temperature, the moment of impact.
You need to attach sensors. You need instrumentation.
Exactly. A blank sphere serves no analytic purpose. You wouldn't just drop an unmarked blob of incredibly expensive metal and hope for the best.
And then there's the value again.
Let's not forget the value. A sphere of pure precision machined tungsten of this size. You're talking tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in material and manufacturing costs alone.
To just abandon that in the civilian area with no immediate, super discreet recovery mission.
It suggests one of two things. Either it belongs to a program so secret and so unbelievably incompetent that they don't track their own losses.
Which seems unlikely.
Highly unlikely. Or it doesn't belong to any active, acknowledged program at all.
So when the two most rational, most logical explanations, space debris and known military hardware, when they are dismantled by the object's own physical nature,
the investigation naturally drifts. It moves towards more exotic, more speculative theories.
that failure of conventional logic creates a kind of intellectual vacuum, and something has to fill it.
This is where you encounter the theory of advanced foreign technology.
The idea being that a rival nation is covertly testing something over a remote area.
Yes. Maybe they're experimenting with unconventional propulsion or exotic kinetic systems, and the silence around the recovery could be because that foreign power managed to hide the trajectory data, or they simply decided to accept the loss to avoid exposing the program's existence.
That seems plausible, I guess, but it still runs into that same accountability problem, just on a geopolitical scale.
It really does. Even if a foreign power lost a component over Australian territory, the geopolitical incentive to get that object back is enormous.
You can't let a rival nation analyze your experimental technology.
It would be a massive intelligence failure. The continued silence, on an international level, it requires us to assume that either the object contains no useful intelligence, which contradicts the expensive material choice, or that every major global power just decided to ignore a highly unusual piece of tech falling onto Allied soil.
It stretches credulity.
It does. And so, almost by a process of pure elimination, we arrive at the theory that causes the most controversy.
Non-human origin.
It's a theory driven almost entirely by the stark absence of any other conventional answer.
The logic is if it's demonstrably not natural.
Not typical industrial waste, not acknowledged aerospace debris, and not claimed military hardware from any known nation.
Then, advocates argue, its origin must be outside the publicly known boundaries of human technological capability.
They point to the perfect symmetry, to that unprecedented density combined with a gentle landing. And they sometimes cite other similar reports of perfect metallic spheres that have allegedly been found elsewhere.
Places like Mexico, parts of Europe, though the verification on those other cases is often pretty weak.
It's very weak, but it is the ultimate default setting for the inexplicable.
Which means we absolutely have to introduce the skeptical counterargument. Could this entire thing just be a really well-executed hoax?
Or a gross misinterpretation of something mundane that just got amplified and snowballed online.
That is a critical consideration. In the age we live in, ambiguity gets clicks. Viral myths are manufactured every single day.
It's theoretically possible someone could have found a perfectly machined industrial part, maybe an old counterweight from specialized mining equipment, and then just embellish the story.
They could have fabricated the witness accounts of a crash and the impossible weight to make it more interesting.
And if it were a hoax, that would explain the silence. The creators wouldn't want to expose their own deception.
But there's a counter-argument to the hoax theory, too.
There is. It's the object's persistence and its lack of resolution. For a hoax to be successful, there's usually a payoff. An emotional one or a financial one.
Someone confesses, someone tries to sell the object.
Exactly. There's been no confession. The physical sphere has simply endured. It exists as this quiet, physical challenge to certainty. It was never monetized, and no one has ever stepped forward to take credit for creating what would be a highly successful and long-lasting international mystery.
The object's continued, silent existence. It makes it really hard to just dismiss the whole case as a simple fabrication.
It does. It complicates things immensely.
After going through all the evidence and taking apart the conventional theories, I think it's vital we step back and try to separate what we know from what we assume.
That's a crucial distinction. What is known is limited, but it's concrete.
We know a dense, seamless metallic sphere, highly likely to be tungsten based on the density analysis, was found on the ground.
And we know it landed without leaving the kind of crater physics tells us it should have.
But what remains unknown is vast.
It is. We don't have the precise metallurgical profile. Is it pure tungsten? Is it a specialized alloy, maybe blended with nickel or iron to give it certain properties? We don't know.
We don't have any instrumented data. No trajectory, no altitude, no exact time of arrival.
All we're relying on are fragmented, anecdotal witness accounts. And those are always subject to the problems of human memory and perception. We can't even say with 100% certainty that it fell from the sky, only that it appeared where it wasn't before.
And the reason for this lack of definitive closure, at the end of the day, it comes down to resources and access.
You can't solve a mystery involving advanced metallurgy with a hand magnet and a bathroom scale.
No. To get definitive answers, you need extremely advanced and extremely expensive processes.
You need sophisticated metallurgical testing, which would mean cutting into the pristine surface of the sphere itself. You'd need isotope analysis, looking at the ratios of tungsten isotopes. That could potentially tell you where the ore was mined, or even what manufacturing process was used.
And that requires specialized labs, controlled environments, resources that are usually reserved for major military investigations or high-level academic research.
But because the sphere existed entirely outside of those institutional protocols, it fell into what you could call an analytical blind spot.
Explain what you mean by that.
Think about the regulatory frameworks for investigation. If this was a plane crash, the Air Accident Bureau would be there immediately. They would mandate recovery and analysis.
If it were a piece of acknowledged military ordnance, the Department of Defense would fund a discrete recovery.
But since the sphere didn't fit into any established category, it wasn't dangerous enough to be an immediate public hazard. It wasn't official property. It didn't crash violently. There was no institutional incentive. And certainly no budget.
No one was assigned to investigate it.
No one. So it was too strange to ignore, but not strange enough to justify the millions of dollars needed for a full, definitive scientific workup.
It exists in this perfect bureaucratic and scientific limbo. The answer is theoretically out there, but practically impossible to get.
And because of that, this sphere, it exposes a profound gap. A gap between our expectation of certainty in the modern world and the messy reality of a physical anomaly.
In the 21st century, we just assume. We assume everything that flies is tracked by radar. We assume everything expensive has a paper trail.
And we assume that any significant mystery will be neatly tidied up by a scientific report or an official statement.
This sphere challenges that entire comforting assumption.
It really does. It suggests that even now, in a world saturated with sensors and surveillance, physical objects, highly advanced, very expensive objects, can just materialize without context, without documentation, and they can remain entirely unresolved.
It forces us to confront not just the puzzle of the material itself, but the limits of our own tracking and accountability systems.
I think the real lesson of the tungsten sphere is less about its metallurgical composition and much more about how we as humans process uncertainty.
Do we immediately try to force the anomaly into an existing box, call it space junk, call it a military error, just to make it fit and feel safe?
And by doing that, dismiss the genuine unknown? Or do we have the intellectual fortitude to just allow for facts that resist a neat and tidy classification, to just let the mystery exist?
That psychological drive to close the loop, to find an answer, is incredibly strong.
It is, and that's why these competing narratives, exotic alien tech on one side, classified superweapon on the other, they form so fast and become so deeply entrenched in discussions about it. Each narrative offers a sense of control over something that feels uncontrollable and inexplicable.
And that leads us to the enduring legacy of this object. It remains permanently stuck between categories.
It's not conclusive proof of anything extraordinary, but at the same time, you can't easily reduce it to a simple, mundane explanation either.
It lives in that uncomfortable intellectual space, where the physical evidence is genuinely too compelling to just ignore.
But it's critically insufficient for certainty.
In this case, it's a perfect example of how quickly narratives can solidify around incomplete information.
The initial story, the impossible wait, the soft landing, that spreads instantly today. But the scientific verification process, that's slow, it's costly, and it requires an institutional buy-in that, in this case, never happened.
So the assumptions hardened into beliefs long before any kind of authoritative verification could ever catch up.
Leaving the object suspended in permanent mystery. And the object itself, it hasn't changed. It's still dense, it's silent, it's featureless. It hasn't degraded or revealed a hidden serial number. It simply exists, a persistent physical question mark that reflects back the gaps in our own knowledge, the gaps in our own systems.
So let's just recap the three core contradictions that really ensure the tungsten sphere remains one of the world's great unresolved mysteries. First, you have the clash between its perfect engineered shape.
A shape requiring high-precision manufacturing like sintering.
And the idea of a chaotic natural re-entry, which should have left it scorched, melted, and deformed.
Second, that huge physical mismatch between its extreme density, a material perfect for high-velocity kinetic applications, and the consistent reports of a soft landing. A landing that left no impact crater in hard, compacted ground.
The basic physics of mass and momentum just don't allow for a gentle arrival like that.
They don't. And finally, the third contradiction. The clash between the high value and sensitive nature of the material itself, tungsten, and the complete and total silence surrounding its loss.
No official body from any country has ever claimed ownership, despite the immense cost and the sensitive nature of any component made from this incredibly dense metal.
The tungsten sphere is not an item that asks us to just abandon skepticism and jump to a sensational conclusion. In fact, it's the opposite. It forces us to apply a much deeper, more rigorous kind of skepticism.
One that compels us to admit when evidence is truly incomplete, rather than just forcing a hasty, convenient answer where one doesn't exist.
The object itself remains a dense, silent enigma. It simply is. What truly changes is what we, the observers, choose to project onto it. The fear, the wonder, and the often misplaced certainty that we apply to a simple physical object that showed up without a name, without a history, and without a clear explanation.